Hey everyone, Ricardo here with the Weekly Deck Tech. This week, I'm going over the most absurd list I've seen top in a while. This deck proves that you're only as strong as your weakest link. Today, I'm talking about Slivers. Before we get started, it's important to know a little bit about Slivers. The Slivers have an unknown origin, but man, these things are scary. They have what's called a hive mind. This hive mind trait allows them to share their unique abilities with other close members of the hive. This allows them a distinct advantage when they gather, making them a nightmare to face. So when you see a Sliver enter the battlefield, get ready to start killing every one of them that you see. This is the list that Bryan Dubois took to the 5th place at the Star City Games Premier IQ in Dallas-Fort Worth. Slivers got a very strong addition in the form of Collected Company. When we look at the Slivers placed in the deck, we can have a board state with a bunch of different possibilities. This makes the deck hard to fight because the creatures are always evolving into different threats. Game 1, you might see a bunch of big creatures thanks to Sinew Sliver and Predatory Sliver. Game 2, you might just get killed by a flying Sliver army led by Galerider Sliver and Sliver Legion. I'm trying to break this down the best way that I can, but the only thing that I can say is this deck really preys on the unsuspecting. Bryan's dedicated 4 slots to each Galerider Sliver, Predatory Sliver, and Sinew Sliver. He wants to pump up all of his dudes and get them in the air. With those abilities though, we can have some pretty sick pairs. His one-ofs include Bonescythe Sliver for double strike, Darkheart Sliver for life gain, Essence Sliver and Syphon Sliver for lifelink, Necrotic Sliver for removal, Sedge Sliver for regenerate, Sentinel Sliver for vigilance, Venom Sliver for death touch, Sliver Hivelord for indestructibility, Sliver Legion for a coat of arms-like effect. There's a lot of abilities that the Slivers have, but that's what's so important about one-ofs, is to keep your opponent guessing and to be unprepared for what you might have. The other abilities we have are Diffusion Sliver's ability to keep protecting Slivers with counter magic, Homing Sliver's one-of-a-kind Sliver cycling to help us find the Slivers we need, Manaweft Sliver's ability to give our Slivers the ability to cast any Sliver. With 32 creatures in the main board, he's only got 6 spells, but man, they're good ones. He's packing 4 Aether Vial and 2 Collected Company. Aether Vial helps us get around tricky mana costs for our 5-drop legendary Slivers. It also helps us throw out any Sliver to slip up our opponent's combat step. Collected Company is a very powerful card in this deck because we only have 4 creatures in this deck that cost 4 or more. So this allows us to put whatever we find onto the battlefield. The land base is quite solid as well. We have 4 Cavern of Souls, 4 Sliver Hive, and 4 Reflecting Pool. We have access to all the colors of mana quite easily. Our land base is also quite tactical. We have Mutavault, which is a very good land that allows us to have a Sliver at any time, and Sliver Hive can produce Sliver tokens. The only critiquing that I can do here is having a swamp is important with Sedge Sliver running around in our deck, but we have 2 fetch lands which can help us find the swamp fast. Bryan's sideboard is diverse in answers for a variety of decks. I'll go over the cards that we have for the matchups, along with a brief explanation. In the sideboard we have 2 Chalice of the Void, 2 Spellskite, 1 Harmonic Sliver, 2 Choke, 2 Leyline of Sanctity, 2 Stony Silence, 1 Worship, 2 Devour Flesh, and 1 Slaughter Pact. Chalice of the Void is very powerful against Affinity, Delver, and any other strategy that your opponent will use to cast things on the cheap. We bring this in and usually cast it for 1 because on 2, it'll counter too many of our Slivers. Spellskite is great against any deck that has a bunch of spot removal and boggles. We can bring this in easily against Burn, Twin, Delver, and Boggles. Harmonic Sliver is just fantastic. This allows for all of our Slivers to enter the battlefield and naturalize when they do. This is quite powerful versus Affinity, Boggles, and Tezzerator. Since 2 of the decks I just mentioned are quite rogue-esque, we only have this as a one-of. Choke is fantastic against the blue decks. We can stop control in their tracks, and stop the combo decks altogether by keeping their Steam Vents, Hallowed Fountains, Watery Graves, and Breeding Pools tapped. Leyline of Sanctity is terrific against Burn decks, Jund, and Abzan. We like our starting hand all the time, and we want to stop our opponent from thought seizing and using Inquisition to rip out action out of our hand. It's pretty self-explanatory against Burn. Stony Silence shuts off Affinity completely. They have such a hard time dealing with this card due to its enchantment type. The best they can do is thought seize it from your hand, but if that happens you still have Harmonic Sliver. Worship is a cute one. The reason I say this is we're gaining a pretty clever way of surviving against Twin. Main board we have Necrotic Sliver to vindicate their combo, but now we have a seemingly empty board of no creatures. They make infinite dudes and swing. Well, if we have Worship, we can activate our Mutavault to survive. I like this in our board for the sheer fact our creatures can be pretty hard to kill when they get going, but having the chance to Mutavault for Worship would just be fantastic. Devour Flesh is another awkward sideboard card, but it does help us deal with twin and evasive creatures. Slivers is able to handle any creature deck because it's the best type of creature after all. So we just need to deal with the decks that throw a wrench in our gears, so Boggles and Twin strategies get to see this card. Slaughter Pact is just another tool against Twin. It's our worst matchup because we just can't fight it with the main board. Now this sideboard is pretty much for combo decks and burn. We don't have an interactive deck, which is one weakness that most Sliver players will recognize quite early. What this deck promises is to never lose against another creature deck. Once you have 3 or 4 creatures in play, you can almost fight through whatever your opponent throws at you next. Bryan had unfortunately lost in the top 8, but this is a big stepping stone for Modern. This shows how competitive Slivers are. I urge others getting into Modern to pick up something fun like this because it's not too expensive and it's a crazy deck to play. Slivers have a very adaptive strategy, and with that knowledge, this is the hand I kept going against Jund. What do you all think? Should I have kept this hand? I'm so excited to see brews like this because they give me hope for Modern. With that being said, I'm sure we have a bunch of brews lying around and a whole bunch of sweet tech that you guys and gals out there want to show off. With that being said, I challenge my viewers to post deck lists that you've come up with for a chance to be debuted on the weekly Deck Tech. I can't wait to see what you guys and gals out there leave for me. As always, thanks for stopping by to hang out here at Gathering Magic.